The emergency beacon had died 3 days ago. Marcus Hayes knew it meant he wouldn't be getting off this frozen hellscape anytime soon, but he'd stopped caring about rescue months ago. Survival had become his only purpose on Novaris, a frontier colony world now abandoned by both sides of the war. Wind howled through the skeletal remains of the research outpost as Marcus tightened the thermal wrap around his shoulders. 6 years as a combat engineer in the Earth Defense Force hadn't prepared him for this. Being stranded when his evacuation transport was shot down, forced to scavenge among the wreckage of a civilization. His breath formed crystalline clouds in the bitter air as he trudged through knee-deep snow toward a promising cluster of buildings he hadn't yet explored. Just find fuel, food, or batteries, he muttered to himself, the sound of his voice providing small comfort in the desolate landscape. Nothing complicated today. The settlement had once been beautiful, sleek alien architecture blended with human construction techniques. Now it was a graveyard of broken dreams and frozen corpses. The ceasefire had come too late for Novaris. Most civilians had either evacuated or died during the bombing runs. Marcus paused at the twisted entrance of what appeared to be a research facility. The door had been partially melted by plasma fire, but still offered enough clearance to squeeze through. Inside, ice coated everything: desks, equipment, walls. The artificial gravity still functioned, but life support systems had failed weeks ago. He methodically searched through drawers and storage units, his practiced movements revealing the routine of someone who'd been doing this for too long. A few nutrient packs, a half-charged portable heater, some medical supplies. It was a decent haul. A low, pain sound stopped him cold. Marcus instinctively reached for his pulse pistol. 6 months alone had taught him caution. Wildlife, desperate scavengers like himself, or worse, raiders who refused to acknowledge the war's end. All were threats. The sound came again, distinctly organic. Following it, he pushed open a partially collapsed doorway to what must have been a laboratory. In the far corner, a figure huddled beneath a makeshift shelter of fallen ceiling panels. "Don't move," Marcus called out, weapon raised. "I'm not looking for trouble." The figure shifted, and in the dim light filtering through the broken ceiling, he caught his first clear glimpse. A Zephian woman, tall, with iridescent violet skin now dulled by cold and malnutrition. Her species had been Earth's primary adversary in the war. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, with pupils that expanded in the dim light, watched him with exhausted fear. "Please." Her translator device crackled with static. "No harm." Marcus hesitated. The rational part of his mind screamed danger, but something else, something he thought had died during the long months of isolation, stirred within him. Compassion. She was clearly injured. A dark purple fluid, Zephian blood, had frozen along a gash in her leg. One of her four-fingered hands clutched something small and metallic close to her chest. "You're hurt," he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Left. Behind," she managed through the failing translator. "Ship, full." The bitter irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Their species had spent 8 years trying to annihilate each other, and now here they were, both abandoned on this frozen rock. A violent tremor shook the building. The weather systems on Novaris had never fully recovered from the orbital bombardments. Another storm was coming, one that neither of them would survive alone in the open. Marcus made a decision that defied everything his military training had taught him. "I have shelter," he said, holstering his weapon. "Not much, but it's warm." The confusion in her eyes was evident. Enemy helping enemy, a concept neither of their military doctrines had prepared them for. "Can you walk?" he asked, approaching cautiously. She tried to stand but collapsed with a sharp cry. Marcus moved forward instinctively and caught her before she hit the ground. She tensed at his touch, her skin unnaturally cold against his. "My name is Marcus," he said, as gently as his rough voice allowed. "And if we don't get somewhere warm soon, we're both dead." She clutched her pendant tighter but gave a barely perceptible nod. "Elora," she whispered, her translator crackling one last time before dying completely. Outside, the wind had intensified. Marcus lifted Elora as carefully as he could, surprised at how light she felt despite her height. As he carried her through the increasing snowfall toward his bunker, he wondered if he'd just saved his enemy, or if he'd finally found a reason to save himself. Marcus's shelter was a repurposed emergency bunker, partially buried beneath the rubble of what had once been an administration building. He'd spent months reinforcing it, scavenging functional tech and insulation to create something close to habitable. It wasn't pretty, but it kept the killing cold at bay. Elora watched his every movement with wary eyes as Marcus activated the airlock-style entrance. The storm's howling intensified behind them as they descended into the relative warmth below. "It's not much," Marcus said, knowing she couldn't understand his words without her translator, "but it's home." The bunker consisted of a main living area with salvaged furniture, a small cooking station, and a curtained-off sleeping area. Carefully engineered ventilation systems prevented carbon monoxide buildup from the heating unit. Marcus gently lowered Elora onto his only chair, an old pilot's seat he'd salvaged from a crashed shuttle. Her violet skin had a grayish tinge that he recognized as a dangerous sign of hypothermia in Zephians. Communication would be their first challenge. Marcus rummaged through a storage container and produced an old universal translator, military grade, designed to facilitate basic communication with captured enemies. The irony wasn't lost on him as he handed it to her. Elora hesitated before accepting it, her long fingers brushing against his. The device was clunky compared to her sleek, now broken personal model, but it functioned when she attached it to the collar of her tattered environmental suit. "Why? Help me." Her voice came through the translator with a metallic quality. Marcus busied himself preparing a nutrient solution. "Would you believe I just wanted the company?" "Enemies," she stated simply, one hand still clutching the pendant at her chest. "War's over," Marcus replied, handing her a cup of heated liquid. "We're just survivors now." She sniffed the cup suspiciously before taking a small sip. Her large eyes widened slightly. The solution had been calibrated for Zephian physiology, something he'd learned during his military training. "You know my species' needs," she observed. Marcus nodded. Combat engineer. Had to know what would help or harm different species. He turned away, unwilling to elaborate on why that knowledge had been necessary. Over the next several days, a cautious routine developed. Marcus treated Elora's injury with antiseptic compounds compatible with her biology. The wound slowly began to heal, though she remained weak. Each night, he insisted she take the sleeping pallet while he rested on the floor. Their communication improved as Elora grew stronger. She revealed she had been a botanical researcher, studying adaptation of plants to extreme environments. When the evacuation order came, the shuttles had been overcrowded. She'd been separated from her research team in the chaos. They would have returned, she said one evening, as they shared a meal of reconstituted proteins. But orbital bombardment destroyed communications array. Marcus nodded. "Same reason no one came back for me. Both sides probably think this place is a dead zone. Perhaps we are ghosts," she said, with what he recognized as a Zephian expression of dark humor. As the blizzard raged outside for days, their conversations grew longer. Marcus found himself sharing stories from before the war, his childhood on Earth's ocean habitats, his passion for engineering that had been corrupted by military necessity. In turn, Elora spoke of the floating gardens of her homeworld and her family's generations of botanical research. One night, while checking her healing wound, Marcus noticed her watching him with an intensity that hadn't been there before. "Your hands," she said quietly. "They create rather than destroy." Marcus looked down at his calloused fingers. "They've done both." She hesitantly reached out, her four-fingered hand hovering over his. "As have mine." When she finally allowed her fingers to rest on his, the contact felt like a peace treaty more significant than anything their governments had signed. The pendant she always clutched remained a mystery until the day Marcus returned from scavenging to find Elora standing for the first time without support. She held out the small metallic object toward him. "This is why I stayed," she said. "This is what I could not leave behind." As Marcus took the pendant, it opened in his palm, revealing not a photograph or memento as he'd expected, but something far more precious: seeds, nestled in a perfectly preserved stasis chamber. "Last specimens," she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "Plant species that regulates atmospheric toxins. Extinct on my world now. War destroyed them all." Marcus looked up at her, suddenly understanding the weight she'd been carrying. Not just her own survival, but perhaps that of her entire planet. "Then we'll need to keep them safe," he said softly, returning the pendant to her hands. Together. The first sign of spring on Novaris came not as warmth, but as a change in the quality of light. The perpetual gray of winter gained a subtle golden hue as the planet's elliptical orbit brought it marginally closer to its sun. Marcus noticed the difference one morning while checking his perimeter sensors, and for the first time in months, he felt something like hope. "The ambient temperature has increased by 2 degrees, Elora observed when he returned to the bunker. Her scientific precision remained intact despite everything she'd endured. The snow crust has changed consistency. Spring, or what passes for it here, Marcus agreed, shedding his outer thermal layer. After 3 weeks together, they developed a strange domestic rhythm that neither acknowledged directly. Might actually get above freezing during midday. Elora's recovery had progressed rapidly once her body had proper nutrition and warmth. The graceful, fluid movements natural to Zephians had returned, making the confined space of the bunker seem even smaller. Marcus often found himself watching her, fascinated by the subtle iridescence that had returned to her skin, the way it caught light and reflected it in patterns that shifted with her emotions. "The seeds," she said suddenly, clutching her pendant. "They need light. Real light, not artificial." The intensity in her voice made Marcus pause. "You want to plant them? Here. They are hardy specimens, designed to thrive in compromised environments." Her long fingers caressed the pendant case. "I was transporting them to Earth as part of the peace negotiation. A gift, a species that could help heal atmospheric damage on both our worlds." The revelation stunned Marcus. While he'd been fighting on the front lines, others had been working on reconciliation, on a future beyond conflict. "I know where we might be able to do it," he said after a moment's consideration. "There's an intact research dome about 2 kilometers east. The structure's sound, but it was abandoned early in the conflict." Elora's eyes, those large, expressive orbs that had once seemed so alien to him, widened with unmistakable emotion. "You would help me with this? What else am I going to do? Winter inventory is complete, and my collection of salvaged entertainment modules is sadly lacking." The joke came easily, something that surprised them both. The journey to the research dome took longer than expected. Elora was still regaining her strength, and the melting snow created treacherous conditions. When they finally arrived, Marcus used his engineering skills to restore partial power to the facility while Elora assessed the growing conditions. "The environmental controls are functional," she announced, her voice carrying an excitement Marcus hadn't heard before. "And the soil composition is viable with minor modifications." Working together over the next several days, they transformed a section of the dome into a makeshift greenhouse. Marcus repaired irrigation systems and rigged solar collectors to supplement the dome's power, while Elora prepared growing mediums with meticulous care. Their hands often brushed as they worked side by side, and increasingly, neither pulled away from these moments of contact. The day Elora decided to plant the seeds carried the weight of ceremony. She opened the pendant carefully, revealing 6 tiny seeds that glimmered with an inner luminescence. "On my world, this would be done with many witnesses and official documentation," she said softly. "Here it is just us." "Maybe that's fitting," Marcus replied. "Just survivors, making something new." As she placed each seed into the prepared soil, Elora hummed a low, melodic sound that the translator didn't attempt to convert. When Marcus asked about it, her skin flushed a deeper violet. "It is a blessing song for new beginnings." She hesitated. "In my culture, it is also sung at bonding ceremonies between those who have chosen each other." The implication hung in the air between them. Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the dome's temperature. That night, they camped in the dome rather than returning to the bunker. Neither wanted to leave the newly planted seeds. They sat together, watching the moons of Novaris cast silver light through the transparent sections of the dome onto the small mounds of soil that represented so much hope. "I never thought I would feel this again," Elora said as the night deepened. "Feel what?" Marcus asked, though something in him already knew the answer. "Purpose," she replied. Then, more quietly, connection. When her hand found his in the darkness, her touch no longer felt alien. Her skin, slightly cooler than human temperature, seemed to fit perfectly against his own. Marcus found himself tracing the delicate patterns on the back of her hand with his thumb. "When I found you in that building," he said, his voice low, "I thought I was saving you. But maybe we saved each other," she finished. The first kiss came without planning or discussion, simply the natural convergence of 2 beings who had found something unexpected in the ruins of war. Her lips were softer than he had imagined, carrying a sweet, herbal taste that reminded him of mountain honeysuckle on Earth. When they separated, Elora's bioluminescent patterns glowed more intensely across her skin, a physiological response that needed no translation. "In the spring, things grow," she whispered, her face remaining close to his. Outside, the last winter winds howled in protest against the coming thaw, but within the dome, Something rare and beautiful had already begun to bloom. The seedlings emerged within days, far faster than Marcus would have expected for any earth plant. They glowed with a faint phosphorescence at night, casting emerald shadows across the dome walls. Elora spent hours monitoring their progress, recording observations in a salvaged datapad. Each millimeter of growth seemed to restore something within her that the war had taken. For Marcus, watching her work was a meditation. The precise movements of her long fingers, the subtle shifts of color across her skin as she concentrated, he found beauty in aspects of her alienness that once would have triggered combat reflexes. They respond to emotional states, Elora explained one evening as they sat beside the growing plants. See how they lean toward us when we sit together? Marcus observed the slight bend in the stems, reaching toward where their shoulders touched. Are they sentient? Not as we understand it, she replied. But they sense biochemical changes in the atmosphere, including those produced by emotions. She hesitated. On my world, they were often planted at places of significant gathering. They flourished where there was harmony. Their new routine centered around the greenhouse dome. They'd moved most essential supplies from the bunker, creating a small living space in what had been a monitoring station. The dome's transparency offered a view of Novaris that neither had properly appreciated before, the slow transformation from white wasteland to a landscape of muted greens and browns as spring advanced. It was during this tentative spring that they first detected the signal. Marcus had maintained a passive scanner, more from habit than hope. The sudden ping from the console startled them both during an evening meal. Military frequency, Marcus said, reading the signal characteristics. Earth Defense Force. Probably a patrol checking for salvageable technology. Elora's skin paled to a lighter violet. Will they come here? The question carried implications neither had confronted. Despite the ceasefire, military protocols regarding enemy combatants remained harsh. Elora had no official status. She wasn't a registered civilian, diplomat, or prisoner of war. She existed in a dangerous limbo. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But we should be prepared. 2 tense days passed before they spotted the patrol ship. It maintained high altitude, conducting thermal scans of the abandoned colony. Marcus and Elora retreated to a shielded section of the dome when the ship passed overhead. In the cramped maintenance shaft, pressed close together in darkness, the barriers between them dissolved completely. If they find us, find me, Elora whispered. Marcus silenced her fears with a kiss, deeper and more urgent than their previous tentative explorations. Her body, initially tense, melted against his. The differences in their physiologies, her cooler skin temperature, the subtle ridges along her spine, the bioluminescent patterns that intensified with emotion, all became points of fascination rather than division. I won't let anyone separate us, he promised against her neck, where her pulse fluttered beneath iridescent skin. Her hands, those elegant four-fingered hands, traced the contours of his face with wonder. The first time I saw you, she confessed, I thought you were a harbinger of death. Now I cannot imagine life without you. The intimacy that followed was a journey of discovery, tender exploration of alien landscapes, gentle guidance through unfamiliar terrain. Where their bodies differed, instinct and whispered directions bridged the gaps. Where pleasure revealed itself, they lingered, creating a new language of touch that required no translation. Afterward, they lay entwined in the narrow space, her body curved against his, her skin emitting a soft, contented glow. The war took so much from both our worlds, Marcus said, tracing the luminescent patterns on her shoulder. I never imagined it would give me something so precious in return. Elora placed her hand over his heart. My people have a concept, Nishivka, for which your language has no direct translation. It means the beauty found only after great suffering. Nishivka, Marcus repeated, the alien word feeling right on his tongue. I think humans understand that concept, even without a specific word. The patrol ship departed the next morning without landing, continuing its systematic survey of abandoned colonies. As its engines faded into the distance, Marcus and Elora emerged from hiding to find something miraculous. The seedlings had nearly doubled in size overnight. Extraordinary, Elora breathed, kneeling beside them. This accelerated growth shouldn't be possible. Marcus knelt beside her. You said they respond to emotional states. Maybe they felt. What happened between us? Color rippled across Elora's cheeks. It's scientifically improbable, but... She touched one of the luminescent leaves gently. There are many things I once thought impossible that now seem inevitable. That night, they moved their sleeping pallet directly beside the growing plants. No longer needing to hide from each other or the cold, they shared warmth freely, exploring the new intimacy between them with increasing confidence. Elora's quiet sounds of pleasure mingled with the subtle chimes of the plants as their leaves brushed together. "If the patrol returns," Marcus said as they lay together watching moonlight filter through the dome, "we have choices to make." Elora propped herself on one elbow, her bare skin glowing softly in the darkness. "I have already made mine," she said, placing her hand over his heart once more. "My choice is you." As if in agreement, the plants around them pulsed with gentle light, witnesses to a union that defied history, biology, and the wreckage of war. The plants grew with astonishing speed. Within weeks, they stood waist-high, their stems strong and flexible, leaves unfurling in complex geometric patterns. The air in the dome became noticeably cleaner, crisper, evidence of the plant's remarkable filtration properties. At night, their bioluminescence bathed Marcus and Elora in gentle blue-green light as they slept entwined together. "They're ready for propagation," Elora announced one morning, examining the first flower buds. In optimal conditions, each plant could produce enough seeds to restore entire ecosystems. Marcus watched her work, still marveling at how she'd transformed their existence. The cold, functional survival he'd known before finding her had given way to something with purpose and probably, joy. Their intimacy had deepened with each passing day. The initial awkwardness of navigating physiological differences had evolved into a profound knowledge of each other's bodies. Marcus had memorized the patterns that rippled across her skin when pleasure overtook her. Elora had learned exactly how to trace the contours of his spine to make him shudder with desire. Their lovemaking often left the plants around them pulsing with sympathetic light. It was during one such peaceful afternoon, as they lay together watching clouds through the dome's transparent panels, that the communication system Marcus had repaired months ago suddenly crackled to life. "Repeat. This is the Joint Recovery Mission Harmony seeking response from any survivors in the Novaris colony sector. Earth Defense Force and Zephian Reconciliation Command working in cooperation. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond." The message cycled again as they stared at each other in stunned silence. After months of isolation, the outside world had found them, but which outside world? One still divided by hatred, or one truly seeking harmony? Elora's hand tightened around Marcus's. After all this time, Marcus approached the communication panel hesitantly. "I should respond." "We should respond," Elora corrected him, moving to his side. Together. With a deep breath, Marcus activated the transmitter. "This is Engineer Marcus Hayes, formerly of Earth Defense Force, and Botanical Specialist Elora Nevarin of the Zephian Science Academy. We receive you, Harmony." The response came almost immediately, voices overlapping in excitement. Questions followed, their status, their needs, coordinates for extraction. Behind the professional inquiries, both heard the unmistakable shock at their joint response. "They didn't expect to find us together," Marcus said after ending the transmission. "They're sending a shuttle." Elora moved to the plants, touching a leaf with reverent fingers. "What happens now?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. The war was truly over, the joint mission proved that. But peace didn't guarantee acceptance of what had grown between them. "We have choices," Marcus said, joining her beside the plants. "You could return to your people. The seeds, your mission, could be completed." Her skin darkened with emotion. "And you?" "I could return to Earth. Or," he gestured to the dome, "to the life they'd built. We've proven something here. Not just that these plants can grow, but that we can too. Together." Elora's luminescent patterns flowed like water across her skin. "My research was always about adaptation, how life finds ways to thrive in hostile environments." She took his hands in hers. "Perhaps we are the most successful experiment." When the shuttle arrived 3 days later, its crew, 2 humans and 2 Zephians, could not hide their astonishment. The dome had transformed into a verdant paradise. The plants, now reaching toward the ceiling, created an environment unlike anything on either Earth or Zephia, a perfect hybrid ecosystem. But it was the sight of Marcus and Elora that truly rendered them speechless. The human and Zephian moving in perfect synchronization, clearly intimate, clearly bonded. The seeds survived, Elora told the Zephian scientists formally, presenting samples she had carefully prepared. "They are ready for propagation protocols. And they've proven even more adaptive than anticipated," Marcus added. "They respond to emotional states, particularly harmony between different species." The shuttle commander, a veteran human officer, studied them with undisguised curiosity. "You've been here alone since the evacuation?" "Together. We found each other in the aftermath," Marcus said simply, "and discovered something worth preserving." The Zephian scientists examined the plants with professional interest that quickly gave way to awe. "These modifications, they shouldn't be possible," one murmured. "The accelerated growth, the enhanced filtration capacity. They evolved in response to their environment," Alora explained, her hand finding Marcus's naturally. "As did we." That evening, as the crew prepared the shuttle for departure, Marcus and Alora stood at the edge of the dome, watching Novaris's 3 moons rise over the horizon. "The Reconciliation Commission has requested we present our findings together," Alora said softly. "Both the botanical research and us," Marcus finished, smiling. "They believe our experience may be valuable to the peace process." Her luminescent patterns swirled with emotion. "A case study in the possibility of harmony." Marcus pulled her close, savoring the now familiar contours of her body against his. "Is that what we are? A case study?" Alora's laugh, that musical sound he'd first heard on a cold night months ago, echoed through the dome. "We are Nishivka," she whispered against his lips. "The beauty found after great suffering." The shuttle would depart in the morning, carrying them and precious samples to a universe still learning how to heal after war. There would be challenges, prejudices to overcome, bureaucracies to navigate, possibly even hostility from both their peoples. But as they made love one last time beneath the glowing canopy of plants that had flourished on their combined care, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that what had grown between them was strong enough to weather whatever came next. "The warmth you gave me that first night," Alora whispered as they lay entwined, her body cooling his, "is warming hers in perfect equilibrium. I will return it to you for all our days." Outside, the harsh landscape of Novaris continued its slow transformation from battlefield to renewal. Inside, beneath the sentinel plants that stood witness to their union, 2 survivors from opposite sides of a forgotten war held each other, proof that life finds a way, not just to survive, but to flourish in the most broken of worlds.